people who set it up did their job well because it was supposed to be classified from the very beginning. Anything that gets over 60 years old tends to break down. And then you have one incident, and it's remembered in the history books forever. We have a real failure to communicate between the government, the Department of Justice, the NRC, and the watchdog groups and the citizens who have to live there.
Well, why shouldn't we?
You shouldn't.
Why?
You can't.
Why?
Because a lot of the things that happened were classified, and therefore they're things they're not just never going to tell you.
Stief zeigt dem Historiker Paul DeRienzo ein paar Fundstücke.
357 Magnum.
Eine Kaliber 57 Magnum.
Die Kugel steckt noch im Lauf.
And a 9mm.
Und ein 9 mm Revolver mit Handschellen.
Refugees from Germany who had come to the United States therefore believed that Germany might actually be able to produce a bomb before the United States could.
Author and journalist Paul DeRienzo says Amnesty's assessment of aspects of U.S. foreign policy are right on target.
The United States, while quick to condemn other countries for their violations, gloss over what was happening in places like Egypt and Tunisia.
Egypt is a in many ways, very westernized country, but in many other ways also a very traditional country, and these type of divisions and splits are coming out.
Do you agree that this is a good step?
Of course, it's a step that was a long time in coming. The reactor has been in operation since 1969. As one activist said, it's sort of like driving a 1960s car when everybody's zipping around in Teslas today. It was really sold to them as a great technological achievement and not as a destructive weapon, and they didn't know until much later.
It's got to go someplace anyway.
Yes.
So why not just store it where it is?
Right, that's what they don't want to do. That's what the public doesn't want to have happen. Transuranic waste is supposed to go to the waste isolation pilot plant in southeastern New Mexico. It would be trucked down there and buried about 2,500 feet under the ground in a salt mine. That salt mine has already had tremendous accidents. There was a drum of waste from Los Alamos that was improperly packed and exploded. At that point, there was a desire to drop the bomb either as to send a message to the Soviet Union at that time, which was the other victor in the war and would soon be involved with the U.S. in the Cold War. It was the most expensive project ever undertaken in American history. Billions of dollars in today's money was spent, and there might have been an investigation that this was some sort of boondoggle.
Hi, I'm Paul DeRienzo, and welcome. I'm so happy to be back. It's been months since we've been live, and this is our first live show since the COVID epidemic began. And of course, you're seeing it. It's not really live, it's taped, but I'm here live, so it means it's live to me. But you'll be watching, of course, the next day. This is Monday afternoon. But either way, it still would have been, it'll be 8 p.m., slightly after 8 p.m. now, and Tuesday, and we're waiting, right? We're waiting for what's going to be, who's going to be the winner, right? It's all about being the winner, right? It's winner take all. It's the election for president of the United States. It's either going to be Donald Trump reelected to another 4 years, or it's going to be Joe Biden, the new president of the United States, taking office on January 20th. So we're, I'm sure, all sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for those returns. The first polling places are probably just beginning to close right now, and we're waiting for those results from the key battleground states. And there's a number of them thrown around, but I guess it's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Remember, Pennsylvania is a state that Donald Trump won by only 4,000 votes, approximately 4,000 votes, I believe, back in 2016. It seems that long, doesn't it? 2016. And Michigan and Wisconsin are usual Democratic states that went Republican when the Democratic choice was Hillary Clinton. So can Joe Biden reverse that and recreate what they call the blue wall of the Great Lakes industrial Rust Belt heartland, the former industrial heartland of America? Well, we're going to find out, right? If you're watching this right now, we're going to be finding out in a few minutes what the first returns are coming back as the polls close. New York polls are yet to close. We know, as of today anyway, I know that upwards of 90 million people have already voted, mostly by mail, others by early voting. Many of you have probably, in Manhattan, right, this Manhattan Neighborhood Network, many of you have probably already voted over the last 2 weeks, leading up to that, since the 24th anyway, till now. And hopefully won't be stuck waiting for hours and hours today, Tuesday, which is for me Monday. We hope. We hope you're not. You've already voted, and you don't have to wait forever and ever and ever online. Okay, that said, what is this about? What are we going to look at tonight? What are we going to look at this afternoon? By the way, it's going to be just me. We're going to go back to guests hopefully in weeks to come. This is sort of my experimental tipping my toe into the water of this new post-COVID reality here at MNN and all over New York, as we all know. Just riding a subway, they're so empty, right? The subways compared to what they usually are on a Monday or a Tuesday afternoon when they were jam-packed with people. And I would be coming here to do my show, usually from my job or from my gig over at BAI or something or another. And it would always be a crowd, a big crowd, standing room only in the subway, the A train, even at 6 o'clock, at 7 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening, still standing room. And now the trains seem empty. New York does seem empty. It doesn't seem like a ghost town, not what Trump said, but it does seem empty. Everybody's thinking twice before they go anywhere, and a lot of people are obviously working from home, right? So that's a reality that we have to deal with, and this is impacting the election, of course, as we've been discussing. Now, what do we have to look forward to? Well, could this be an election that goes down to the wire? If such, that wire could be days and weeks in advance, right? Because what happens? I think there's a fallacy that people really think that, well, you vote for president, right? Like you vote for mayor. The person who gets the most votes is the mayor. The person who gets the most votes is represented in Congress or in the city council or all the other things we go and vote for every day, right? The majority wins. You get one more vote than the opponent, your next highest opponent, and you win, right? So what's different about presidential races? Well, you have to read the Constitution of the United States. And I think that this is a good reason for people to read the Constitution, right? It's a long document. A lot of amendments have been added onto it, right? One of the most interesting is the 12th Amendment, and we'll get to that. But where it begins is the Electoral College. You, when you, the voter, go and cast your ballot, you don't vote directly for Joe Biden or your horrors, Donald Trump. If you're a New Yorker or a Manhattan resident, you're probably not voting for Donald Trump since he said we're an anarchist city and threatened to shut us down with armed forces, the Department of Homeland Security, as a city of traitors to his America. But aside from that, you don't vote for him. You don't vote for Joe Biden. You vote for an elector, right? The elector is equal to the number of representatives that are in your state, all right? So those electors then, at a later date in December, I'm not going to say the exact, I think it's December 6th, right? They meet and then they cast their ballots, and then that eventually goes to the House of Representatives. The Congress then accepts or denies those counts, and then they, by a certain date, later, I think December 14th, they decide who is the president of the United States. And then on January 20th, the president takes the oath of office, the new president. Now, here is a situation. What happens if there's a situation like we've had before in American history where a person wins the popular vote but loses in the Electoral College? Well, that happened in 2016, right? Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes approximately than Donald Trump, yet Donald Trump won because he won more states with higher numbers of electors, and his electors were more than the 270 minimum needed to be elected, and he became president of the United States even though he did not have a majority of the votes. That's happened a few times in American history, most notably in the year 2000 between Al Gore and George W. Bush, and it's happened before in American history. So that can happen. Now, the other thing that can happen is that, let's say Biden is winning. What could happen there? Well, we'll get into delays. There could be delays in the vote count because there's so many mail-in ballots that have to be counted. There could be delays in because of the long lines, delays in counts even on the day of the election. It'll delay, right? So things could be delayed, and it could go on for days. It could take days or weeks, right? I think Congress says December 8th is the day it has to be decided, right? And I actually have those notes here, so I can give you the exact date.
if I find the notes. You know, remembering exact dates, it's not what I do. Let's see. It has here, let's see, the big risk. So they call it the call, right? When they call the election, that's usually what happens is when the loser calls and says he's lost the election. Remember what happened when George W. Bush called the election? He called Al Gore, and then he reversed it. He withdrew his call because he saw he was going to win. So all state disputes have to be wrapped up by December 8th. Electors cast the ballot on December 14th. The state government must certify the electoral votes. It's not official till Congress approves those ballots on January 6th, and then the president is sworn in on January 20th. Now, that is usually what happens, but here it is. If a state count is challenged, right, the governor could refuse to certify the state's electoral votes. The state legislature, or that's one, so the governor could say, I don't approve this. I don't agree with the count. That is the more common outcome. That might happen, right? But at least a less common outcome that has happened, and the one that people fear in this election the most, is that the state legislatures could contest the elections and send a different count to Congress. So there could be two slates of electors, one that was elected by the people and one that the state legislature of that state has decided that they are going to send, that they don't agree with the first list of people. So that results in two outcomes. One, there's no result is turned in to the Congress. The state says, no, we can't decide, no result. Or there are competing results from the same state. All right? So that is a violation of law, right? Because the law says that very strictly that by December 8th, they must have it wrapped up. All disputes have to be wrapped up. So if by December 8th, the disputes aren't wrapped up, instead they have two slates of candidates as proof that they haven't wrapped it up, then that's a violation of the law. That's a violation of the law. Okay, so that means Congress has to take action. All right? Now, they have to figure out, either decide which of the one or the two slates are valid, or throw them out altogether, not even count that state. Guess what? That's happened before in history, right? That happened in 1876. Samuel Tilden won the popular vote, but 19 electoral votes were in dispute. Rutherford B. Hayes was named president in a deal in exchange for the end of Reconstruction. That means U.S. troops were pulled out of the South, and the beginning of Jim Crow, the beginning of modern-day discrimination and segregation in America that's led to this day to the Black Lives Movement began. So now, you might say, so that was a deal. They worked out a deal to the detriment of African-American people to choose Rutherford B. Hayes as the President of the United States, and poor Samuel Tilden is just a footnote in history. But what happens if yet there is no deal? If they can't make a deal, right? And look at this Congress. What's been going on, right? Do you expect a deal between the Republicans and Democrats? Can they work something out if there's some number of disputed electors? I'll let you guess. I'll let you. I think it's a toss-up whether they could come to a deal or not. I don't know. I don't see it. So, no deal. Then it goes to the 12th Amendment. Ta-da! The 12th Amendment is a very interesting amendment. It says, the House of Representatives decides who is president, and each state gets one vote. In other words, it's not all the House of Representatives voting, which the Democrats would win. It's each state voting separately. And guess what? As of today, it's my understanding, according to Nancy Pelosi speaking a few weeks ago, that the Republicans have one vote. They actually, even though they have less total number of representatives in the House of Representatives, they actually have one more state than the Democrats. So it could come to 49-51, right? And therefore that would, obviously the Republicans would choose Donald Trump as president of the United States. Now, that is the House of Representatives decides who's president. The Senate decides who's vice president. That's interesting. That's sort of a footnote to this whole thing, right? And if there is no decision, if they cannot find a decision, if there is just a 50-50 tie and there's no way to decide, by January 20th, a new president must be sworn in by law on January 20th. It has to be somebody. And according to the 12th Amendment, that person is the Speaker of the House. So that would make Nancy Pelosi the temporary president of the United States. Da, da, da. So that is the worst case scenario one of the worst case scenarios of what could happen tonight. All right, now there are 3 states in focus, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. All 3 have Democratic governors. But Wisconsin, for example, has a Republican legislature and a Republican Supreme Court. That has diminished the power of Evers, who's the Democratic governor of Wisconsin, for example. And that's one I know a little bit about. So, for example, there's been problems there with the legislature actually voting to eliminate the powers of the governor when a Democrat was elected back a few years ago. So they could do. They have it's a very divided state. It's a state that's almost at war with itself in the state of Wisconsin, and this is the reality of it. So, okay, we could have civil war in the states. Now civil war, ooh, dirty word. Well, could there be a civil war? Could there be a civil war? That's another issue. So, we have these right-wing militia groups, right? Or some of them say they're not right-wing, they're just patriot groups or whatever. I don't know if you can believe that. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt for now. So you have militia groups, right, which are basically self-organized gangs of men, mostly, with some women. Some of them are all white, some of them are a little bit interracial, but basically they're heartland American white people. And they own machine guns of all different kinds. I guess they're not supposed to be machine guns. They're just set so they only fire 1 bullet at a time. But, a little fiddle like that, and they're machine guns, right? And so they go and practice being soldiers in the woods. Okay, then you have, but they tend to, some of them are right-wing, some of them are supremacists, but they generally, as militias and patriot groups, they like to assert that they are there just to defend America. But, as you can see, it was an article today in the New York Times or somewhere that showed the close relationship between the police and some of these groups coming there. We're here to support you, as one member of a militia famously said to the police, who welcomed them. And, of course, there was during the protests that happened earlier this summer, there were many incidents of police handing water bottles to militia people and generally welcoming them. A welcome that was not given to the protesters, even when most of them, the vast majority, were nonviolent protests. So, all right, you have a deep connection between the police and these patriot militia groups that are coming to defend property, right, against these made-up enemies, Antifa and all these things that don't really exist. And so the possibility of them getting involved. Okay, number one. Number two, Trump really believes that the early voting has been mostly Democratic and that tomorrow there's going to be a huge turnout of Republicans at the polls. We'll see. We're going to be watching that, or today, I should say, because this is Tuesday and you're listening to me on Tuesday. So today, if I was here live, I'd be telling you if there are reports of huge lines of Republicans at the ballots, at the voting polls all over America. We don't know. I don't know yet. We'll see. We'll see today. We'll be talking about it right now. So, okay, that's a possibility. Now, another possibility is neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups that are specifically neo-Nazi and white supremacist. I'm talking about the Poor Boys. I'm talking about Aryan Nations. I don't know if they still exist, but groups like that, neo-Nazis, the Nazis, they go by different names. Or you go to the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, and look them up on the internet, and you'll see the list of different groups. Okay, and of course, hovering behind that is this QAnon thing. Q, right? QAnon. Are you Q? Where we go one, we go all. Right? Now Q is obviously a organization that promotes a Christian fanaticist point of view, a fanatical evangelical right-wing Christian point of view. I mean, they try and hide it this way and that way, but when I've been watching their Q drops for a while. They call them Q drops. They're little like they try and like lead you along, sort of like Hansel and Gretel, leaving little crumbs to follow, and they call them Q drops. These crumbs. Now, what is Q? We're not even sure what Q is. It's supposed to be an insider with Q, like super top secret clearance within the government, who knows all this stuff. Well, I don't know and who's close to President Trump, and that President Trump is engaged in an internecine battle against a group of pedophiles and child slave traffickers within the deep state. And this somehow happened at some pizza place in Washington, D.C. Now, the theories have been disproved and discredited 1,000 times over, but anybody who's had any connection, any contact with some of these crazier of conspiracy theories, and listen, there's plenty of conspiracy theories I hold myself, Kennedy assassination for one, right? But not every conspiracy theory is as strong as every other, and then you have to be able to make a decision which one you decide on or not. And the Q one tends to really seem to me like the Protocol of the Elders of Zion type of thing, the ancient blood libel against Jewish people throughout history. And there's this real element to that in the pedophilia focus and the Save the Children focus and the hashtags and all of that. It seems to be just a rehashing, the George Soros is behind it all type of theory and all of that. It's the typical, in times of stress in Western Christian societies, you see a rise of virulent racism and virulent anti-Semitism that takes on these ancient blood libel forms. Okay, so Q, I don't think every QAnon person is a person like that, but I think a lot of people read the protocols of the Elders of Zion and believe it's true. And they don't know it was a czarist. It was a conspiracy in itself, a forgery by the czarist secret police. Czars were the kings of Russia before the Russian Revolution. So, it's my firm belief that when you have extreme anti-Semitism in a society, that's the beginning of the end. They had the Dreyfus Affair in France. You had the rise of Hitler in Germany. These societies collapsed more or less dramatically, right, soon, within a few years of the outcome of these kind of theories. So it's not a good thing for America to get too tied up in a bunch over this kind of stuff, because if you really believe this stuff, it really is a sign of a political rot in our system, and we have to be very careful about that. Political rot. Speaking of political rot in our system, racist political rot. Okay, so not every Q person obviously is that, or believes, or thinks that that's what it's about. But you should learn your lessons from history. History speaks to us over the millennium, over the decades, over the years, and people who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that's really true in many ways. So don't repeat history. All right, it's a dead end. It's a dead end for your society and your country and your economy. All right, that's me speaking. Q. So will there be a rise of these right-wingers? Are they going to try and seize power in the days after the election if there's a very close election? Now, there's another possibility that few people dare to say, right, especially because they don't want to do anything that might discourage people from going to the polls or make them feel they don't have to. But what about Carville, right? Carville's been saying this. He says that they're going to call it for Biden by 10:30 p.m. tonight. 10:30 p.m., Donald Trump is declared a loser. And that my sources in both the Republican and Democratic campaigns, and believe it or not, I have two sources that are high level in both campaigns, and they're both saying that Trump is going to lose from 10 to 15 million votes. So do you think that Donald Trump will lose by 10 million votes and maybe as much as 15 million votes tonight? You know how we'll know that?
It'll be hard to say exactly, but one way I think a sign that we'll know that's going to happen, something like that is in the works, is if Trump loses Georgia, if he loses Florida, if he loses Texas, if he loses Ohio, those are North Carolina. You start seeing those states, those kind of states go blue, Arizona, then you're seeing the beginnings of what might be a historic blowout in this election against Trump. I sort of believe that's what's going to happen. But I don't want to discourage anybody from voting because we don't know. But there's nothing more unsure than an election, I'm telling you. So you can't ever go by some idiot's prognostication. Don't go by that. I'm telling you, vote, vote, vote. All right, this is necessary. And I'm not a guy who tells people to vote. But this is it. This is, democracy is the first line of defense. There's other lines of defense after that, and I hope never to have to get to those things in my lifetime. But if we don't want our children to live in a nightmarish society, where it's unsafe to walk down the streets, we better make sure our democracy is healthy. And defeating Donald Trump is like totally ridiculously necessary to keep democracy healthy in the United States, and that ain't enough. Believe me, without people in the streets, all the democracy in the world is useless, all right? We need more than just voting. Voting is just literally the minimal, and it's not enough. It's a situation where the minimal is just not enough, okay? So you gotta do more than just vote. You have to turn out. Now, if tonight it looks like Donald Trump is going to win, or if it's going to be so tight, then I would suggest that people get on the internet, get on the horn to their friends, and find out where the nearest protest is going to be, and get out there and peacefully protest, all right? Show yourself. Now, if it's a blowout for Biden, so the reason you want to go do that is because we know what Trump's going to do. He's made it clear what the next 4 years are going to be about. They're going to be further. They're going to further attack so-called sanctuary cities like New York, right? They're going to further reduce our funding, and they're further going to marginalize the urban centers of America that don't go along with them. Okay, and that's going to cause real pain. And then they're going to totally eliminate any sort of medical science-based approach to COVID. So forget about the masks, forget about the masks, forget about anything else but like taking steroids like our dear president. Forget it.